Hi there. Welcome, everybody. Good evening to you if you're this part of the world, or good morning or good afternoon. Welcome to another Fireside Chat. This is our 45th, and actually it's the last of this current series. I'm taking a break for the summer, and I'll be back again on the 9th of September. So welcome Ellie and Stefan and Lisa and Jane from High River, Catherine, Stephanie. Wonderful to see you. Hi, ID. Lovely to see you all. Jules from Wyoming. Wonderful. So it's a little bit cooler here. And Aaron from Thailand. That's far enough away. And Blake from New Hampshire and Ava from Belgium. Lovely to see you all. So it's a little bit cooler after our wonderful heat wave, which I really, really enjoyed. But I'm hoping we're going to have a little bit more sun for this is Lunasa. So we're celebrating Lunasa this weekend, and our Druid brothers and sisters. I see Ben Hopkinson. Good morning, Ben, and he's in Sydney. So they will be celebrating Imbolc this weekend. Anyway, so let me introduce you to my guest this evening. And we're in the UK. And it's Lorien Cadier, who has come specially to London to get good Wi-Fi or good internet signal for this Fireside Chat. Welcome, Lorien.
Thank you.
So good of you to come all this way.
Thank you. Yeah, we need a good Wi-Fi connection.
Good. So I know you're in London at the moment, but yeah. Where do you normally live?
I live in Hampshire, which is in the south of England, which is just on the edge of the New Forest. The nearest big city that most people would know would be Southampton, which is one of the biggest ports in England. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So I know you're in the Sylvan Grove.
Yes.
And I know you have, I've never been to the New Forest, and I know I've had invitations to visit, but I just haven't gotten there. I know you have some of your rituals there. So what's it like?
It's a very beautiful, beautiful forest. Unusual because it was obviously all ancient woodland at one time. But then when the Normans came, in the 11th century, William the Conqueror wanted somewhere to hunt, and he cleared large sections of it. So it became a heathland, if you like. So you've got large areas of heathland as well as forest, as well as what happened. Obviously, they were using trees from the New Forest forever to build boats, and marvelous of oak wood and beech groves there. And then in the Victorian times, they started planting trees. So there were actually plantations more of pine. So it's quite a diverse area, and they have to work to keep that diversity. Its biggest attraction, if you like, is that it has wild animals. So it's protected by grids. It's about, 20 miles by 20 miles, maybe I've got that wrong, but 25 by 25. But there's grids, so there's wild ponies, donkeys, we get pigs. In the season, in the autumn, they come out for pannage to get their acorns. We've got sheep and we've got cattle. So it's an extraordinary area. I was living a few years ago, I was actually living in the forest area. And it was just extraordinary at night, because these animals, they also they go home at night. They know where their home is. And so they plod along the road to where they're probably going to get, a bit of a tasty meal, because a lot of the people who live in the forest have what they call commoners' rights. So they have the right to keep animals, the right to get kindling from under the trees, the right to put their pigs out for pannage. Now, I think what we've done, we've lost Eimear. We have lost Eimear. So I don't know, I can't see any of your comments, so I can't see if you can still see me. I wonder. Actually, I can see that Maggie's on the line. Maggie, can you tell me if you can still see me? Because I think we've lost Eimear. Or if anyone can just tell me if I'm still live. Okay, so I'm still live. So yeah, I'm just going to keep talking, I think, till we get Eimear back. This happened when we were doing the, thank you, all of you. I can see all the comments coming up now. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just going to keep talking till we get Eimear back, because this happened when we were doing the test about 10 minutes ago. So I'll keep on talking. So yeah, I'm a member of the Sylvan Grove, which meets in the New Forest. And the New Forest is a very particular area for me, because I was brought up in Dorset on the edge of the New Forest, and a lot of my family, of my mother's family, was on the other side of the forest, so towards Southampton. So every week I would go across the forest to visit my grandparents. And so it was real serendipity for me that all those years later, when I met some Druids, wanted to join a Druid Grove, and they said, oh, we're the Sylvan Grove, and we meet in the forest. Well, where do you meet in the forest? We meet in a place near Burley. I just knew it so well. So when I walked into the forest with the Grove that day, it was really for me like coming home. So that is very special. We meet for all the seasonal festivals of the year, and also for ritual workshops. Sometimes in a if we can't get into the forest, we meet in a hall in Burley. So it's a very special place with very special people who've become dear friends and are spiritual companions. And I don't know if it's like a lot of you, but I was always challenged when I was a child by feeling very different. I think I was always an outsider. Every situation that I went into, I was an outsider. I was born in London, but taken down to Dorset, which is in the south, as I've just described, just on the edge of the New Forest there, into a very rural community when I was only about 6 months old. But these rural communities, even then when I was growing up, they were quite closed. And my mother, even though she actually came from Southampton, was always called the lady from London. And so I was kind of outside of that community. And I was thinking about it when I was thinking, well, I don't know what questions Eimear was going to ask me, so I'll just keep talking. But I was thinking, well, what was it? It made me feel different. My mother was from a migrant family with, she was half Italian and Irish roots. We were in a community of country folk who brought up their children very differently from the way that my parents brought up me, for example. My parents didn't discipline me harshly at all, whereas a lot of the village children were disciplined, and I found that very frightening. And so I think I felt outside. I had friends there, but where I gravitated to was the land, because we grew our own vegetables. My mother had a real way with animals. And so the land for me was the comfort blanket, if you like. And we were surrounded on our northern side by an oak grove, and I would go there and climb those trees. And whenever I was worried about anything, I was an only child, I didn't have brothers and sisters, I would actually go and into those trees for comfort. And on the other side, we had a field. So I would play in that field where the farmers would grow wheat, and they would bale up hay, and I would make houses out of these bales of hay. But at the bottom of those fields, there was the River Stour. And the river for me, I mean, we were always told as very young children, you must be very careful of the river. It's a very dangerous place. So it was kind of magnetizing for me, that river, that very elemental river. If any of you know the River Stour in the Wimborne area, a very wild and elemental river. There was a weir there, which was to create a mill race where there'd been a mill. so very, very deep water. There was a wobbly kind of suspension bridge across the Stour. We were told we could walk across that and play in the water meadows, but not to play by the side of the river. So I was going to talk a lot really this evening about my relationship with water, because that really was the tension for me, that real magnetism, because I wanted to beside it. There were reeds, there was reed beds under the water. It was very magical. It was very clear, but obviously always being told that it was a frightening place. So there was this kind of incredible curiosity, I think, a curiosity to kind of explore that difference of the people around me, my family, who seemed very different to everybody else, and the place. I was always trying to find out about the place that I lived in, its history. I was very interested in that, and then looking for connections. So the connection came for me with the land and the waterways, and that was an extraordinary experience. And I never ever moved very far away from the sea. We moved further, nearer to the coast. My father was one of these people who swam every day. He used to go swimming on Christmas Day. You know, he loved the sun, and he would go down to a place called Lulworth Cove. Now, I know from the comments here, if any of you know Lulworth Cove, but it's on the Jurassic coast. Dorset has a Jurassic coast, was one of the oldest coastlines in the UK. It's got fossil fields. People go there to find fossils. It's chalk cliffs, and Lulworth Cove creates the most extraordinary bay, but again, very, very elemental. It's a place where smugglers used to come in, so it's really got that feel. As you walk down, you can imagine them coming at night and unloading all their goods. Well, this is where my father used to go to swim. So when I was 2 years old, he took me out on his back to swim. I couldn't swim, and he just rolled over and said, well, 2-year-olds can swim. He had no fear for me. Quite strange. So, again, I was thrown into this elemental water at a very, very early age. And that continued through all my childhood until we moved nearer again into the big city at that time, which was Bournemouth. And again, I had that sense of kind of disconnection, because I won a scholarship to a fee-paying school. I didn't come from a very rich background, so I was disconnected again. Intellectually, it was fine, but there was this kind of disconnect. So all the time I was coming back to the sea and the land. And we finally moved to Eastbourne in Sussex, and I discovered another amazing county of England. So again, coming up towards the Seven Sisters, towards the ports. There you've got Brighton, which is the biggest town. Coming along to Eastbourne, it's called the Seven Sisters, a very beautiful part of the southern coast of England. And there we lived right by the sea. The end of the road was the sea. So a pebble beach, a very elemental place. And it was only when I went to university that I realized, a lot of people at that time chose their university by how far it was away from their parents. And that's what I did. So I went to this place called Leicester. I knew it had a good degree course. I'm a psychologist. I was trained as a psychologist. I took my first degree in psychology there. But then, of course, I realized I was landlocked. It's right in the center of the UK. And that, for me, was an enormous disconnect. So, I think it's that kind of learning process of understanding that I had to go back. And I wondered, I'm seeing a message, I think, from Eimear that her internet is down. So if you're okay, I will just kind of pretend that Eimear is asking me questions. And I think one of the questions she may well have asked me was how I came to druidry. And so in this elemental childhood, probably feeling a disconnect sometimes with the people around me, looking to the land and the waterways, if you like, to understand, to integrate, to learn. I have a teacher at school, and probably again I should put this into context. I was not brought up in any religion. My mother had had a very bad time with the Roman Catholic Church during the. Eimear's watching me. Okay, hello, Eimear. Yeah, my mother had a very bad time with the Catholic Church, so she said that I would not be brought up in any religion. So again, you know, a lot of my friends at school used to go to Sunday school and things like this. I just didn't do that kind of thing. But of course, I was curious. You stop people doing something, you become curious. What is this thing called religion? You know, my grandmother kidnapped me and had me baptized a Catholic. So I am nominally a Catholic. But my mother wasn't present for that, and I had godmother. So there was this fascination, and when we moved nearer to a town, I used to go and lurk outside the church. And what it was a Catholic church, much to my mother never knew, and I could smell the incense. You know, I must have known somewhere deep in my soul that this incense was attracting me, and the ritual used to stand at the back in the doors, but also in the if you like, in the terrace at the front of the church. They would sell these little cards that had the Virgin Mary on, or saints, and they would have little verses, and I would buy them with my pocket money and I would hide them under my pillow. So there was obviously some sort of desire for spirituality, which was strongly disagreed with in my household. So there I was searching, and I met a teacher at school who introduced me. She'd been living out in India, and she introduced us, as I say, the class, to Buddhism and Hinduism. And when she did, and I must have only been about 13, I was entranced. And I thought, well, she described the middle way and balance and mindfulness and spiritual practices like meditation. And I think, you know, surprisingly, she must have been way ahead of her time. She had us meditating. And something like 14, I wrote off and I joined the Buddhist Society. And I remember I used to get these little booklets that were called lotus blossoms, and I would cherish these booklets when they would come through, and until my mother found out. And actually, she went to a psychiatrist and asked the psychiatrist if, you know, her daughter really needed help, because she tried to bring her up, you know, not religious, and this was all happening. Luckily for me, the psychiatrist said, you know what, just leave her alone. I think she'll be okay. So there I am, coming through to my later teens as a practicing Buddhist, entering university, you know, time of the hippies, it all fitted perfectly. And I think, and I will talk about this, while I was at university, and I think I went to my first Glastonbury festival, which I always thought was the first Glastonbury festival. Turns out it was the second one. But there were Buddhist monks there, and they were drumming. And when I heard that drumming, that was true connection. I actually remember the moment. And that drumming brought a kind of, it was like all I can describe, it's like a dance of life where everything seems to line up. You know, you're completely in the present. And I know that many of you are drummers, and you link into this all the time. And it's that alignment, being in the moment and with the sound. So that was an extraordinary experience for me. And it kind of was like a benchmark, you know, for going forward. And I think when Eimear and I were talking, when we did this sort of connectivity test, she said, well, don't say too much, because, you know, it's all got to be new. But I don't think as time went on, I became a druid. I think I actually realized I was a druid. And I remember, hearing the story. My husband spent a lot of time out in India, and he went to ashrams and he went to Dharamsala. And they were at the feet of a lama, and they were saying, we're meditating and we're doing the yoga. What should we do now? How do we go forward? And the lama said to them, go home and be good citizens of your own countries, your own lands. And this really resonated, not only with Paul, but with other people were there. And I think that was the process that happened during my 20s. It was kind of, yes, I'm a great traveler, and I'd love to tell you something about my travels on this beautiful planet. But it's a kind of coming home to your own land. So it's like, with all the things that had gone before, the spiritual practice that I already had, it's revealing that you're a druid. So I think that is an extraordinary process. I wanted to talk to you a bit more about my relationship with water, because I think I mentioned, the river was this fascination. Lulworth Cove, the Dorset coast, was this fascination, but also terror. I used to get very frightened. And there I was, kind of at 21, coming out, I'd gone right the way through the educational system. And I thought, well, I've done this degree in psychology, but actually, I don't think I know anything about people. I'm supposed to be studying, I'm supposed to be studying, the study of behavior. I've hardly really been exposed to it. I mean, okay, I had a really big family and they were pretty eccentric, a lot of them, but, it was like, expand your horizons. So I know Joe Dunbar said to me, Eimear's going to ask you, what's the most daring thing you've ever done? I think that was going to be one of the questions, wasn't it, Eimear? And I think the most daring thing I did was, having graduated, I got a job on a cruise ship as a disc jockey. Now, how that came about was an act of complete synergy. I love music. I've got a really eclectic taste in music, but I wanted to go away. I wanted to travel. I didn't have any money. So I thought, well, I've got to get a job. And somehow, advert in the paper, and the phone call comes, do you want to go around the world on Sunday? This is Tuesday, on a ship. And I thought, that sounds amazing. But I was equally terrified. I mean, I was a hippie. I don't even think I had a proper pair of shoes. I had to borrow money from my grandparents to actually get on board and look something like presentable. But there was that terror too. Disc jockey, no problem at all. I could do that, loved music. I was operating in a nightclub on the ship. But the first night when we went to sea, or the first or second night, we went across the Bay of Biscay, and I got told off because I had my life jacket on, and the staff captain told me that I was frightening the passengers because, I was terrified. I was thinking, I'm on this fucking big ship. It was so stormy, and I was very, very frightened. So again, it was this kind of push-pull with the sea. But in the end, I went 11 times around the world. Went on around north-south to Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific Islands, went through the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. And Eimear's coming back. Hello, Eimear.
Keep talking. You're doing amazing. I am so impressed. This obviously is your DJ experience. Has you just sailing the seas of internet downletting, etc. I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'm back. So keep talking. You're amazing.
All right. Right. So there I am. And I think then it was, this relationship I had with the water, because there was some serious partying. I mean, you go on a cruise ship, there's going to be serious partying.
Great.
But there's a lot of time for you to stare at the sea. And I talked about this once in a talk I gave at a gathering about this idea of encounter, where you're encountering, a being. And feeling this connectivity, seeing the flying fish and the albatrosses and the turtles, an extraordinary experience. So it became, realizing that connectivity. And I think, we were thinking, about ecological things then, because I remember this cruise ship actually chucking rubbish, all its rubbish used to go in the sea. The sharks used to come around the back, and I used to think, no, this has to stop, this thing chugging around the world. And we've had this conversation, this is a wonderful thing to do, but you have a responsibility, this obligations to make sure that what you're doing is sustainable. So yeah, that was a really extraordinary relationship, and it's kind of bringing me, I think, now to everything that I love about Waterways. I went on, I'm not sure that I would ever go on a cruise ship, a proper cruise ship again. Once you've done something like that, you don't do it again. But, it's Waterways. I've been on the River Nile, the Rhine, the Rhone. When I'm in London, I feel like I'm in the arms of the goddess. I'm in between the Thames and the Brent, which is Isis and Briege to me. So I walk a lot beside the rivers, and maybe we'll come on to talk about some of the work that I'm doing with the Sacred Earth activism. But Eimear, would you like to ask me a question?
You've made me redundant. I thought, I don't ever need to do this again. I just need a few Loriens and then the thing will happen itself. Talk about being an automatic fireside chat. I'm so impressed with you. And thank you for the kind welcomes back. I'll just see some of the comments. You were talking about your relationship with water earlier, and I don't know if I missed or if there's anything you wanted to expand on that.
Yeah, I think it is about it's about the going to the source. I like going to the source of rivers as well, and I think it's this idea as well of a kind of, I know somebody called it liquid history. When you're, a Siddhartha was a book that impressed me a lot, when I was sort of in my early 20s, of him gazing at the river. The river is a tidal river, particularly, watching the tides go in and out is something that's so resonates with our own systems, because we are made of so much water, and of course then brings in the action of the moon. So you get this then very close relationship with the cycle of the moon. So I guess it was kind of taken to be what I call the goddess, what other people will call earth energies or planetary energies. It brought me to that. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. You were talking about, okay, for somebody who's been all over the world.
Yeah.
I know, where is home for you? And I know you talked at one point about your outsiderness.
Yes.
And I'd love you to talk about that and expand on that.
Yeah, well, I think I have found my home within myself.
Okay.
I think I'm, for those of you who are, and I know there's many of you that are astrologers in the audience, I'm a Gemini and a double Sagittarian. It just blows it away. I cannot stay in one place. The lockdown has been a very difficult time for me. And sometimes people just marvel at the amount that I do travel. It is the journey that I just love as well. So yeah, I am very comfortable moving around, but I guess over time, what has become, if you like, my land-based homes, and I did live on a boat for a while on the Thames, which was really lovely. It was something I'd always wanted to do, and to feel, that movement of the boat. I really needed to do that. But is the place in Hampshire, because that is in ancient woodlands, and I'm very interested in megalithic sites. So most of my traveling is plotted around visiting megalithic sites, as my family will tell you, not another stone.
Okay.
You know, the family album, you know, it's not quite like everybody else's, but yeah, so I navigate by megalithic sites and or sites of interest, you know, hill forts and things like that. So the place that we live in Hampshire is actually on the side of an old hill fort. It's called Dunwood Camp, which probably wasn't completely finished. It may well have been used as a beacon site, because on a lot of these ridgeways, you've got places like Toot Hill, Tote Hill, where they were lighting beacons, you know, along the. It could have been one either that wasn't finished or was actually only just used as a beacon site. But we find flints there all the time. We find work stone. So that is a very, very beautiful home, and the grove is there as well, which, you know, are my spiritual companions, which is so wonderful. But as you see from my name, Cadier, my husband is half French. So we've also had this very intimate relationship with France for the last 40 odd years, because when we were, and I've heard your other guests talk about this, Eimear, you know, it's about intention, sacred intention. And really, when we met, we were a couple of hippies without any money, and we had our children. We thought, well, what do you do when you have children? Or well, you kind of provide a house for them, you know, you give them music lessons, and you do this sort of thing, and you clothe them, and you do all these things. Oh, and you take them away on holiday. You know, but we had been, or both of us individually had been all over the world, and I didn't really fancy, you know, having a child strapped on my back and go around. So the French thing is to go away. They get all, you know, nervous if they don't go away on the 1st of August and come back at the end of September to a village which is often linked to where they grew up. And so we had visited very close to where my husband's family comes from. His family come from the Drôme in southern France, but we went into Vaucluse. And Vaucluse, if any of you know it, is east of Avignon. It's in the hills called the Luberon. It's very interesting again for us because it's a place where the Vaudois lived, and the Vaudois were heretics. What they wanted to do was read the Bible in their own homes. And because of that, they were boiled in oil, they were killed. I mean, horrendous massacres. But it's made the people that live there very strong, very independent. A lot of Marseillaise people come up. It's about an hour and a half from Marseille, come up and have their holiday homes there. It wasn't surprising to me that we ended up in that area because, again, it was kind of an area of rebellion and, you know, people who were on the edge. You know, it's Garrigue, they're kind of hill mountains, about 2,500 feet, with holm oaks. Very good. It gets very hot in the summer, quite cold in the winter, but holm oaks, and of course, just wild herbs and lavender. So extraordinary place, you know, wild thyme and lavender. So we cobbled together what was then a ridiculously small amount of money and bought a bit of land 2,000 feet up with no gas, no water, no electricity, and a ruin on it, and a 60-foot fig tree growing in it, and thought, well, we can take the children on a holiday here, you know. I mean, luckily they're not actually on the live feed. See what that experience was like. But you know, my husband's not a builder, we're not builders, but we were like the crew. We let, you know, the children learned to sort of mix cement very young. And of course we then had, or I had, and let's talk about me, I had this very intimate relationship with the planet. I mean, I'd been on the oceans, but suddenly I'm up a mountain with this stone. They got incredible Provençal stone, and we're building a stone house. The only thing we ever had anyone outside to do was to connect the water, which took about 4 years, I think. And it was a long time before we had electric. We used to live by the sun. And of course, you know, like that was an amazing thing. We did it for about 6 weeks every summer. and built the house and lived in a tent in the garden, you know, for 5 years. So these were extraordinary seminal experiences because you get the Mistral, not so strong there because it's a bit back from the Rhone Valley, but you still feel the Mistral, searing heat. You know, I had to take the children away to try and find some shade. We never could go there in the winter for many, many years because we couldn't go inside the place. But, you know, it's a different story now. It's very beautiful. It's very, very beautiful. But it's taken, I remember my husband saying to me, this is going to take me 20, 25 years to build. And it actually took him 35. So, you know, it's been a process. But again, this teaches you, you know, building a house yourself teaches you so much, you know, about making shelter. It's an extraordinary experience. Have we lost you again, Eimear? Oh, goodness me. We've lost her again. Okay. She's frozen on me. Right. I'm going to keep talking if that's okay. So, yeah, okay. I'll just keep talking. Okay. What I know Eimear asked me what I did want to talk about. And what I would really like to talk about is something that I'm involved in at the moment, which I'm sure that many of you have heard of, participate in, so forgive me for repetition, but it's sacred earth activism. And as Druids, this comes naturally to so many of us because we combine ritual, spiritual practice with a practical action to protect the land and the sea and the sky. It's something that comes very natural to us. And I think one of the gifts that Druidry gave me from that background, which was a spiritual education, was actually understanding ritual. And by celebrating the 8 seasons of the year, of laying down that path, of doing it every year and feeling that cycle of the planting, the nurturing, the harvest and the resting of the land, it then prepares you when you need to actively engage to protect the land. So the Sacred Earth activists, you'll find them on Facebook or you'll find them through a website. They're looking to, if you like, engage spiritual people with action and active people. And by active people, I mean all those incredible people who are cleaning up our beaches, cleaning up the waterways, picking up plastic, doing all this work, you know. I coordinated the local Friends of the Earth, and I was very involved in the anti-fracking movement. I was the fracking advisor to the Green Party, so got very involved with all that. So it's kind of this working together of the spiritual with the practical. So it's very important. And the kind of actions that Sacred Earth activism have got involved with are to protest against the building of the Stonehenge tunnel. And I don't know if any of you've seen it on social media tonight, but if you know that the judgment was referred to the High Court, and tomorrow the judge is passing down his verdict on that on that ruling. So we'll know tomorrow whether the Stonehenge tunnel is going to go ahead. Right, hello, Eimear.
Hi, I missed between listening on the phone. I just missed the last little piece. So about this court case, can you just repeat it? Just so I can...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's happening is that when it went to the government for the decision on the Stonehenge tunnel, the people around the table who represented all the different organisations of the planning organisations of, I'm not sure who was around the table, if it was English Heritage, but those kind of bodies, they recommended to the minister that the tunnel not go ahead, but he overruled them. And he said, no, the tunnel's going to go ahead. And so what happened was that there was a legal challenge, and it was taken to the High Court. and tomorrow the judge gives his verdict. So we probably know tomorrow whether the Stonehenge tunnel is going to go ahead. So there's been a camp, and I know Liz Cruz came through on a message. I know she couldn't stay, but I know Liz was suggesting that we support that. There's been a camp at Stonehenge. They've been going into the site, to make the point. There's been a conference, and what they're doing as well is linking in with the wisdom and all that was learnt from the people, for example, at Standing Rock with the protest against the Dakota pipeline, the First Nation protests in Australia against the drying up of the rivers in the Northern Territories, because the farmers were taking all the water from lower down the river, and then the Indigenous people who'd always lived by the river was a living entity for them, had no water. So linking up with those that had various conferences, and also New Zealand, where a river there has actually been given the right to be a legal entity. Interestingly enough, more countries have followed suit. So there's one in Chile. Bangladesh has declared all their rivers living entities. The Ganges, and someone will tell me the other river in India. So this is extraordinary, that there is going to be a personhood status for rivers. So this was really what I wanted to say, the kind of work that I'm supporting at the moment. I mean, I've not been able, as some of you know, I had an accident, so I've not been very mobile. I've not been able to go out, but I'm trying to support. Started to write an article, started to disseminate, to support their work. So I think it's so in chi with everything that we do as Druids. Eimear, have we lost you again? I actually thought, if you wouldn't mind, that I was going to just read you a quote, which really sums it all up for me, and I hope sums it up for you. It's from Llewellyn Vaughan, and he's a Sufi scholar, and he says, "The world is part of our own self, and we are a part of its suffering wholeness. Until we go to the root of our image of separateness, there can be no healing. Only when our feet learn once again how to walk in the sacred manner, and our hearts hear the real music of creation, can we bring the world back to balance." And I think that's a very beautiful quote. And why it resonates with me is, that's my journey, because I had this sense of disconnectedness, if you like, of not being part of a community. It's been a bit for me like coming home. So that has been very important. Well, I hope Eimear was going to ask me, what are my other interests? I have loads. I have lots of other interests. But talking about balance, I think I mentioned right at the beginning of this talk that my mother is half Italian. She had her other half was Irish from County Clare, and rural English made up the rest. It's very conflicting when you go to somewhere like Anglesey, when you have those kind of roots, because you're very aware, we're south of Naples, you're sensitive to your ancestry, you know that you were kind of probably on both sides of the Menai Strait, so it's very, very conflicting. But it's kind of, I think, what with those Italian roots that I have, and as I know, that comes that southern part of Italy, the Amalfi Coast. They come from a little village called Minori, which is between Maori and Amalfi, very beautiful part of the world. You wonder why anyone would want to leave, and then you realise the poverty there. But of course, there's that Greek, that Mediterranean pull in me. And something else that happened while I was at school was I got very interested in Egyptology. And I know when I did a workshop on the sacred wheel of the year, and I talked about that cycle that we have in druidry, and I came to understand that the Egyptians, of course, celebrated that sacred wheel of the year too. And as again, many of you know, we haven't got a lot of evidence that our Celtic ancestors celebrated all 8 festivals. That was something that was very much brought in by Nguyen and Gerald Gardner. But it's interesting to me that the Egyptians had obviously slightly different because of their different seasons, their floods, their inundations. They had a sacred wheel of the year. But what happened to me was that archaeologists were going out throughout the world begging people, just literally in 10p's and 50p's, well, it wasn't then, but money to support them moving the temples when they made the Aswan Dam, and they were going to flood places like Abu Simbel. I mean, it seems the most extraordinary travesty. But an archaeologist came to our school and he gave this presentation about Abu Simbel. And he said, I'm going to have a collection. And he explained a bit about the Pantheon. And I was hooked, completely hooked. And again, I think it was, that resonance with my roots. And of course, when we talk about balance, we talk about coming back to balance. What's so extraordinary about the Egyptian society is it goes on, for some 3,500 years. And its sole purpose was to keep Mahat, was to keep balance. And that doesn't, I don't know that there's been any other society, such successful society in the world that's done that. So that's really the premise of how I've got involved in it.
Well, it's interesting. Thank you for the welcome back. I don't know how long this is going, so I think if it happens again, maybe you can say good night, because I have to log out and keep coming in. I don't know what's going wrong. But interesting, you're talking about the wheel of the year, and there's no evidence that there was an 8-fold wheel of the year, and I agree. In the Irish mythology, we have the 4 what do you call the fire festivals?
Yes.
Well, not so much Imbolc is mentioned in the stories, but you certainly have Bealtaine, Lunasa and Samhain. So all of the main stories that happen at those 3 times of the year. But when we look to our pre-Celtic ancestors,
yes,
you can see the solar alignments.
Absolutely.
That what I think is really nice about what Nguyen did and Gerard Gardner is, okay, let's bring those ancient traditions together and have a wheel that's relevant for these times.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Eimear. And I think too, when, and I can only imagine what it must have been like, the conversations between Nguyen and Gardner. And it must have been an extraordinary atmosphere at that time, is that there was a big job to be done, And, if you'd by actually, I mean, I find that with the Grove, and I think coming in as a barn, you find that it gives you something, a real point of reference for every 6 or 7 weeks to be meeting with your Grove and coming together. And, there's a big job of work to do.
And I think that that 6 weekly, and luckily now we can meet in person. I'm having here in Kilkenny on Sunday, our Lunasa one, we met for the solstice physically, I mean, with limited numbers, but it's so wonderful to have that community.
Yes.
Because it's that we're marking the landscape, and our own inner landscape and how it corresponds to the external one, but also that connection with each other is really, really important. And for me, druidry has been a really important community, even though when I signed up, I wanted to be a solitary druid because I didn't like groups. I don't know. One of these funny things.
No, I was exactly the same. I've been a loner. I've never joined things. I never did join things, or if I did, it was very much on the periphery. So this has been a real eye opener. I know the first time I went to the gathering, I thought, well, I'll go, maybe once and see what it's like. And of course, it's the most joyous experience to go to a gathering, and it's that feeling of being with people that you're on the journey with. I think that is it. I have that extraordinary sense, of the people that I've met through OBOD. It's just been a joy. Yeah.
There's a question from Eimear. I can't let this go. So
Go on then.
putting it up to you. Lorien, is there any chance of you writing an autobiography? It would be incredible. Your combination of earth connection, travel, wide spiritual range, and activism for earth, sacred earth could be so powerful for a very broad readership.
That's a lovely idea, Anne. I think, yes, again, don't tell my family, because they'll kind of say, oh my God, what sort of particular 5 minutes are you going to do that in? But I think it would be a really wonderful idea. I'd love to do it. I think, and it's interesting because when Eimear very kindly invited me, and she invited me I think it was 3 months ago, wasn't it, Eimear? And I wasn't able to attend, and it's kind of going around in your mind, well, what on earth are you going to say, and it does concentrate the mind, because you do start to think, well, why did that happen? What was the journey? And then thinking about this sense of separateness, or never being part of the main group. And I don't often look at people who had so many generations of their family in one village and think that must be really extraordinary. But there's also something which I find quite repelling about it, like, because I can't be part of that. So yeah, well, thank you very much. You've given me a good idea.
Gabriella said, and I don't ask it in this way, but she says, can we ask the hopes and dreams for the future question? So I suppose, what are your hopes and dreams for the future? That's Gabriella asking that question.
Yeah. Well, I think I would like to challenge myself. I've been through a period of, I had an accident, an RC accident, and I'm feeling incredibly blessed to be alive. And I'm a very optimistic person on a good day anyway. But now I'm buzzing. I just sort of every morning I wake up and I think, I'm so glad I'm here, and I want to make the best of it. So next week, I'm going to do something I've never done. I'm going to walk 60 miles. Now, I'm saying I'm going to do it. I'm going to walk from the source of the Thames to Oxford. I'm doing it for charity, because my little grandson was born premature, and there's a charity called Bliss, which some of you have very kindly supported me for the walk. I'm going to have a really good crack at it. I've always wanted to do it. I saw a wonderful idea as well, that I'm going to take some water from the Thames here, and which is further downstream, and I'm going to take it to the source. So I'm going to kind of introduce this idea of kind of like the circularity of the water, and sing to the water. It is a pilgrimage for me, as well as doing the charity walk. It's a personal challenge, because I've never done that before. So I kind of want to look at some of those things that I've never done. And I don't think, it's interesting, lockdown has given me time to think about how much do I want to travel anymore, because I've been to so many places, and I'm thinking more, well, we just came back from Wales and Anglesey. I did an extraordinary tour that I'd always wanted to do of the megalithic sites in Anglesey, and there's so much to see. Love to come over to Ireland, Eimear, and that I haven't seen, and to stay sort of closer to home, but maybe incorporating some of these personal challenges. I've also really enjoyed teaching. I've been lucky enough to do some workshops, and they've been online, but I would love to do some face-to-face, which would be good. And also during lockdown, I finished my training as a celebrant. I'd done the OBOD celebrancy with River, the funeral one, and really got a lot out of that. And again, these things are more than sort of training. They're a personal journey, aren't they, as well? Planning your own funeral. My ashes are going to go into the Thames. The Thames has been an extraordinary river for me, and I'm going to flow with it down the estuary, and hopefully go out to all those places that I've been on the planet. But so now what I did, I took a City and Guilds and celebrancy, and it's not the qualification itself, it was the journey. So now I can offer what I feel as a professional, if you like, not only to druids, but to other people who want a simpler ceremony. So that is another dream for the future. I've done one ceremony at the moment, but I'd love to do some more.
Wonderful. I just want to go back to your walking. It's 60 miles. Are you doing, how long is that going to take you?
Well, I'm hoping it's going to be 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
try and do we've booked sort of accommodation, because in that part of the Thames there aren't many places to stay. It goes through Gloucestershire, Thames Head, which probably may be dry at this time of year, and it comes down through Cricklade, Lechlade, Kelmscott, William Morris's house. But it's quite wild, so I've had to try and find places to stay which are close to the Thames path, which is what we've been walking. So we're going to try for 10-15 miles a day. I've never done 15 miles a day.
Andrew Newton said, of course, it's called the River Isis once you get to Oxford.
Absolutely, and I think Andrew, it's where it comes to the Cherwell. I always still think of it the Isis, and I know Ronald Hutton gave an extraordinary presentation a few weeks ago on the sacred waters.
Yes.
And he said, he thought it was only a matter of time before they found an Isis temple in London somewhere, because obviously they found the Mithras temple, and they'll be digging down for one of these skyscrapers and they'll find the Isis temple, and they won't be able to cover it up. Because don't they say when the Notre Dame burned down, because the Notre Dame in Paris was on the site of an Isis temple. And, there are certain, not sort of conspiracy theorists, but they actually say, ISIS is kind of raising her head. So, yes, Andrew, I always think of it as the Isis anyway.
So I wasn't aware of, not all of Notre Dame was burnt down, was it?
No, it wasn't. No, but there were and in fact, I think the damage was not quite as serious as they thought. But it's still going to take an enormous amount of money to, I think, restore. But yeah, the Notre Dame is on the site of an Isis temple. They know that.
Did they always know that, or they just discovered it after the fire?
She was being revealed, by the fire.
Ah, wow. Absolutely. Now there was something else I was going to say. Yes, and just to come back to Isis, because you are a priestess. Have you been ordained yet?
No, I haven't been ordained as a priestess of Isis. I think there's probably a couple of people on the chat who know the journey that we've been on with this. I would love to be. But I've been studying was studying with Normandy Ellis in Indiana. And it started because she wrote a book called The Feasts of Light, which is about the sacred wheel of the year. So we started doing that. We started doing some more online courses. And then, the way there's this kind of serendipity, she said, well, we're going to do a week of classes in Indiana. And, I was able to go. It was an extraordinary experience. Wow. I made some beautiful friends who I know are going to watch this in Indiana, and had the week with Normandy. We're doing back-to-back classes on Egyptology, the goddess, the Kabbalah, the moon cycles, journaling. It was, and it ended up with a Women of Spirit conference. It was just completely magical, and I enjoyed every moment of it. So yes, I've been studying with Normandy, but because we were going to California, and I think you know that temple, Eimear, which was, I think, Lorien. Her name was Lorien, but not spelled the same. Lorien Vine, who passed away. Tracy DeRegular, I think, runs it now. We were going to go there last December to be ordained.
Okay.
We live in hope. Yeah.
Yes, so we're going to Huntington on Saturday to celebrate Lunacy, and it'll be the first time in
wonderful
18 months or whatever. So just wonderful to be able to do things physically, given where we are.
Yeah.
So, a person in your life that you admire?
Somebody that I know personally.
Yeah, someone who's had, an important influence on you.
I think that would have to be one of my professors when I was at university. And his name was Derek Wright, and at that time he was a very famous child psychologist. And when you get a connection with somebody and you talk, he was a Buddhist at that time, and I was practicing Buddhism, and we remained friends for many years. And I remember him. He he tempered, you know, a lot of those things. I was always talking about growing and becoming, you know, and he used to say to me, like, what are you going to grow into? You know, I'm really interested. You know, like he kind of he questioned me, and I really appreciated that. And I know when I graduated, he spent a couple of hours talking to me about the earth, about the divine feminine, about the journey that I was about to take, you know. And so it was somebody who I thought was very, very authentic, and an extraordinary mind. Yeah. So there's many more, I know, but he's the person who, that's interesting, isn't it? I haven't thought about him for a very long time, and he's passed away now. But you know, psychology at that time was an interesting degree to take, because we were one of the only universities that still did it. It offered it as an arts and a science degree, but it was an arts degree. You know, and we, in the third year, they let us study Freud and Jung instead of sticklebacks going around. Yeah. Do you remember the sticklebacks? Yeah,
I do. I remember them well.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't good for me at all. Yeah, because all I wanted to talk about was Jung. So yeah, you know, it was a very interesting place to be. There were some very interesting professors there. There was Jim Reeson, who'd done all the work with the astronauts in NASA when they'd realised that they send these astronauts up into space, but what are they need something to occupy themselves. It's a bit like when you're driving and you start to get very tired. You've got to have something to occupy them. So they worked on these psychological tests and things that they would do while they were in space to keep them active. So yeah, there were some fascinating people, and Professor Lee, who was one of the, you know, the most famous Freudians at the time. Yeah.
Well, and I didn't know you were a psychologist.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I took my first and my second degree in psychology, and my doctorate I did in actually in what is transnational studies, or sociolinguistics, but yes, I did train as a Jungian psychologist.
Oh.
But interestingly enough, you know the process. You have to have a degree, you have to have experience, and you have to have about 100 hours of your own analysis. And it was very hard for me because I didn't have much money. And I thought it was an enormous indulgence and I couldn't afford it. So I really fought against it. But actually, in the end, as most of these things happen, it was just another extraordinary journey. Yeah. But at the end of it, I decided I didn't want to be a Jungian psychologist, and I think it was because of the process. It was so long and it felt so, what's the word, bourgeois, you know, like only certain people afford it. Yeah. And I thought if I did it, I would work with children, because at the time I was working with disadvantaged children in South London. But in fact, I went on to train as a hypnotherapist and a psychotherapist, and I always had some kind of small practice along with the other things that I did.
It's nice to have that mixture of, and that's what I have a small practice now, but I also work with a theatre company and I lectured for 27 years at third level. What were the other things you did in addition to your psychotherapy?
Okay. I come from a very multilingual, multicultural family, as you've realised. And I also was trying to find a way to stay at home and not go out to work when I had 3 children when they were getting a bit older. So I was racking my brains and things started coming up. And I was looking at the way, I have a son who's raised in Amsterdam and is Dutch speaking. And I looked at the way that he learned English. And what he didn't learn English, you know, like from a book. He spoke fluent English by the time he was 5, 6, and he learned it in phrases. So I started researching. That's what I did in my master's degree, communicative language teaching. And I set up a language school for children. And I think I can right in saying I was the first person to send native speaking teachers into nurseries and after school clubs, really young. And I ended up with a language school in West London, which had about 400 children a week. We were doing all sorts of languages in the end, Punjabi, Arabic, all sorts, as well as the mainstream European languages, but in small groups and only in the target language. It was an extraordinary thing. And then I developed from that, came in sort of a corporate language school as well. So it was, it was very exciting. I mean, it was my business, but I ran it for many years from home.
I'm blown away. What haven't you done?
No, you don't want to know that. You don't ask me that question. No, your internet had to go down again.
I'm just blown away, but how you've packed all of that into your life. It is just astounding.
Yeah. It hasn't felt like that, really. I mean, it hasn't felt, well, I'm not sure if the family would hear, they would say something different, but to me, it hasn't felt that manic. I mean, it's fueled by an enormous curiosity, an enormous curiosity about life, I think.
But there's one question from Gabriella. Does Lorien sleep?
Yes, I do. I always had trouble sleeping, actually, and I did sign up for Philip's sleep school, because, and that's helped me a lot. Yeah, because often the brain is working and it's very difficult to sleep. So that has been a challenge, Gabriella. Yeah,
I used to be a great sleeper, and then between grief and menopause, I stopped. And I hadn't slept for 3 years. And I was one of the guinea pigs for Philip when he was testing out his online sleep course.
Yeah.
And so like every week he had a new exercise we had to try out, etc. And then give him feedback.
Yeah.
One thing that worked for me, because everything else, I had all my bedroom. I always had everything cued for sleep.
All the smells, the insects.
I had all of that. None of that was working. None of that. I would look at my bed and I'd say, I know you're meant to be a cue for my sleep, and I wouldn't. And the one that worked was where during the day you had to just visualize yourself doing your normal things, getting ready for bed, getting into the bed, rising above your body and seeing yourself sleeping and doing the normal, you turn this side, you turn that side. That did it for me.
Interesting. Yeah. I think with me, it was the nighttime ritual, because I found that, like going into the bathroom and putting bright lights on, and I'm sorry, I'm looking quite dark, or the lights are going dark. All of that, I realized was waking me up, because I'm prone, I mean, anything will wake me up, like I'll start thinking. And I realized that, so I had to kind of calm that down, and either not put the lights on and very sort of gently, brush my teeth and not do too much, and then do all the spray thing. One thing that didn't work for me was like leaving a book running, like so he said, you could leave somebody talking, because I just keep listening to it, Because
even his meditations, because I love the sound of his voice. And he would set me to sleep, and then there'd be silence, and then he'd speak again, and I'd be awake, and then it wouldn't work again. So it's like you, I need to have earplugs, eye mask, it has to be complete dark, everything has to be silent.
Yeah.
So
I mean, one of the problems for me is that I can't sleep on anything that moves. So when I've done all this traveling, I mean, I was okay on the ship, actually, because that is quite lulling, the whole thing of those. It was 2 years I was on that ship. But in a plane, I can't sleep. So that is a real problem with the amount of traveling that I've done.
That's now that I'm the main driver. Well, I'm the only driver in my life at the moment. But when Howard did the driving, because he loved to do it, I would be within the 3 minutes in the car, and really? I would dream.
That's incredible.
Of course I can't now because I'm the driver, but
yeah.
I will catnap if I can, because I don't sleep so well. But I used to think, because Margaret Thatcher said sleep was a waste of time. I think Newton said it was a waste of time. So many but and then you end up with Alzheimer's or other problems as a result of not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
Now I'm really, really careful. So if I go to, I am a night owl, you see, but if I go to bed late, I make sure I get up late so that I get my 8 hours, 8, maybe 8.5, depends.
Yeah, I think I'm being a lot kinder to myself than I was, because I would stay up and work into the night, and also I would do things like do the ironing in the middle of the night, because it was the only time that I could do it, and actually it was quite soothing. But so I don't have to do that anymore. I could walk around in non-iron clothes. But one thing, and we haven't touched on, which I think is interesting, and we talk about this traveling really, is pilgrimage, because I think we had at one of the gatherings, we had Will, didn't we? We had Will Parsons talking about pilgrimage.
Yes.
And I think what I'm going to do next week is a kind of pilgrimage. But I know when just before our first grandson was going to be born, I was in the OBOD grade, and I wanted to do a pilgrimage. And we actually went from Land's End to John O'Groats in the car, and then over to Orkney. We slept in the car because it was all the wrong time of the year. People said don't do it. It was like March. It was freezing cold. But and we did it through the megalithic sites and along the ley line, so the Michael line, and then through the Albion, the Albion line. But this is another way actually that I find it relaxes me. And interestingly enough, even though we were traveling, it wasn't particularly comfortable sleeping in the back of the car. I did sleep very well, again, because you kind of feel that you're in the right place and it's the right time. And it was quite interesting when I got to Orkney and got to the Stones of Stennis, which were extraordinary place to me, that my feet were sore, and I actually felt that I'd walked it. And I hadn't at all, but my feet were really, really sore. So maybe I walked it in the past. I don't know. But, I think this idea of pilgrimage as well is a way as well to get you into that moment. I talked earlier when you were away about this. I've realised these moments when you're in a dance of life, when everything is lined up. I don't know if you get it, Eimear, when you play the harp. I heard it when I heard the Buddhist monk's drum. I heard it when I was in Tahiti and I saw Polynesian dancing, which is totally immersive, and you get into it and you join it and you're in that rhythm. So I think anything that you do, be it walking, being traveling or whatever, puts you into that space and actually helps you sleep better.
Absolutely. I want to go to Orkney someday. It was Howard and I had both hoped to get there, but anyway, it'll be me now. Hopefully someday, who knows?
Well, I think it's set the intention. I mean, unfortunately we were only there for the day, which was unfortunate. But we did see Scarab Brae, and we did go to the Stones of Stennis and the Ring of Brodgar. So that was just extraordinary for me. That was a dream come true.
It's beautiful. Just a number of people talking about pilgrimage. Debbie, I walked the Pilgrim's Way from Winchester to Canterbury, a life-changing walk.
Absolutely. Did you do it in one go, Debbie? I wonder, because that is quite a walk, isn't it? If you do it in one, I don't know if she will say if she did it in one. Yeah, but that, I admire people who can do that, because I know when Will was talking, and I follow him on Facebook, and he does these walks, but I mean, he camps, that's amazing. That is incredible. That really must be, true pilgrimage, if you can carry, whatever sleeping arrangements you have and do that. Yeah.
I know in 2013, two friends of mine, Dolores Whelan and Karen Ward, developed the Bridget's Way walk from Faughart in County Louth to Kildare, and it's a 9-day walk. And I did from Faughart to Tara, and that was 4 days, and staying in Beath the nights. It was lovely.
Yes.
Can OBOD organise a sacred trip to Orkney? That's not something we do.
Well, maybe you might get invited to speak there, Eimear. That would be
So I don't know where Gail, I think Gail is in the US, but anyway, yeah. And healing art, I don't know who that is. It took me 2 weeks to walk from London to Canterbury.
Yeah.
I know certainly if you're doing like the Camino, and when we were doing the Bridget's Way walk, it's roughly about 20 kilometers, 20 miles a day.
Yes.
That's something that you can manage because you need to sustain it, you know. Yeah. We did it in 27-degree heat, and that was in 2012, I think, or 2013. I can't remember which was something else to quite a heat. But I think the idea, I've been to Iona, and that was like we had to cross water, 3 times. So it was driving up to Belfast, getting the boat, then across, and then down onto onto Mull, and then across to Iona. Really, really interesting. And that sense of pilgrimage and the challenges and trying to get ferries on time and all of that, because it was a group of us. Yes, Gail, I was thinking of Philip's trips to Iona. He did those years and years ago. So I don't know if he'll do them again or who will.
It's a very magical place. And I know I went with a friend who is a Christian who she's not a vicar. It's something like, coming up to be a reader or something like that. And we meet, once a year. We have these very interesting chats. So obviously she was looking at Iona in a different way, maybe to me. But we walked over to St. Columba's Bay, and I really had a very mystical experience there. I actually felt him arriving, and I felt him being welcomed by druids. I had this lucid, if you like, waking dream there. I felt it so strongly that he was welcomed when he got there.
It's Ilon E, it's the island of druids, but also the island of yew, the yew. Yes. Yew tree, although not a yew tree to be seen. So few.
No, nothing at all. I walked up to Dunai, up to the top. There's absolutely nothing. But it's such a magical place with the colours of the stones. And we went out to Staffa as well, which to me is one of the wonders of the world. It's what a beautiful planet we live on, and you've got that incredible link, haven't you, between there and the Giant's Causeway.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's, and the name, so it's Fingal's Cave, Finn McCool, and of course, what do you call him? Mendelssohn was fascinated with it,
absolutely.
And so he wrote this piece.
Well, a couple of my American friends they were due to come over in the lockdown, and we were going to meet on Iona, which would have been a very special experience, but obviously that all had to be cancelled. So we're hoping for the future we will go. And I want to go to Skye because I've never been.
I know.
Never been to Skye. There's these places, that sometimes the weather defeats you or whatever. You can't, but it gives you something, always to think that would be very lovely to do. Yeah.
I was to go to Scotland and the islands this summer and on a pilgrimage, but hopefully next year, another time. Skye and Susie McNeil was a guest of mine months ago, and she lives on Skye. Do you know Susie?
No, I don't. No.
She's a member of the order. It's her beautiful Gaelic that she's in the recordings, either in the Bard or the Ovate Great. Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah.
So
these places are amazing. In fact, there was an article that came out this week that actually said that they've been analysing, this idea of negative ions, which are at the top of mountains, and they say that also that when they've measured the inside of megalithic sites and stone circles, these negative ions are higher than they would expect. So this idea of going to these places, these sacred places, like going to Iona, going up to Nye, there is a method in it. There is a reason why you feel called to go, probably because it energizes you. And I don't think it's certainly not just in a physical way. It's in a spiritual way as well.
Oh, absolutely, because you can feel it. It's just that what this great opening up that it's absolutely great. I can hear them. Am I hearing airports and traffic and things?
Yeah, you're hearing a plane. In fact, there's hardly any. So I wouldn't have been able to. I've got the windows open. I wouldn't normally have had the windows open because they would be going. But because of the decreased air traffic, there's very, very little. So it hasn't been spoiled by too many aircraft.
Do you honor the ancestors?
Sorry?
Do you honor the ancestors, or how do you do that?
I honor my immediate ancestors in a very active way. And so I visit the sites where their remains are, and at Samhain I would say put a photograph up of them at the table, if you like, to invite them to a meal. I have a very, very strong sense of my ancestry. Back. I come from this, on my mother's side, a very large family. I think it's 11 children were living. We know that there were more that my grandmother lost. So something like 30 first cousins. And so we have this extraordinary sense of family. And yes, I do. I visit places, ancestral places of mine. And I think too that this fascination I have to go to megalithic sites is as well to honor the ancestors. The work with the sacred earth activism, I was writing an article today, and I was talking about the ritual practices of giving offerings, in rivers, like at Flag Fen in near Peterborough, where they found all sorts near the causeways, the Battersea Shield. There were obviously offerings because that shield wasn't thick enough for battle. There was no damage. They get daggers that are broken. The River Severn, they've had lots of offerings. It's something that when I get something very successful, it happens to me. I always give. I have quite a lot of silver bracelets, and I always throw a silver bracelet into the water to thank. And I think it is about saying thank you. You can ask for help, and I do. I do ask for my guides and my ancestors for help, but I think you also have to say thank you. So I do feel a very immediate connection, not only with my immediate ancestors, but also that ancestral heritage that we all have.
That's wonderful. And certainly as a future ancestor, I think you're leaving a great legacy when we think of all that you're doing in terms of your activism. And I think it's lovely to see that, that I don't even have to ask you that question. You've already spoken about it, with your sacred earth activism.
Well, I think it is. And I think, I'm technically I'm retired. I can hear sort of chuckles in the background as I would say that. But, I spent a long time, working incredibly hard with a business that I was passionate about, and I went on to work for the government, and I did a PhD quite late in life, and that's another story because I did it with migrants, it's so I kept on like a sort of a very, very busy level working, and when I retired I thought I want to step away from doing things that are paid, and I know there's a privilege to that, to be able to step away, but also too there is some sacrifice because you have to decide you're going to live on a fixed income and what that's going to be. So I did immediately when I retired, I joined the Friends of the Earth, and I became a coordinator for our local Friends of the Earth branch. And I'm also very passionate about the arts, so Art Society. So I think that it's that idea, isn't it, of making the best use of your time, and stepping away from that. One of my French friends put it so beautifully, is the difference between avoir and être, to have or to be.
Yeah.
And I think, not all, sometimes you have to wait. I had to wait very many years, it almost seemed. Yes, there was a practice there which was underpinning it. But I remember the first time I'd been going to a lot of rituals all the time. Glastonbury and Avebury were my go-to places because I'd been brought up very close to them. I knew them very, very well, and a lot of the people I knew went there. I joined a circle of light that met in the fairy ring up at Avebury, all those kind of things. But I started going to the Pagan Federation events in Conway Hall in London. And I remember Arthur Pendragon came.
Yeah.
And at the time, Arthur was actually associated with OBOD. He went off on his own. But I remember him talking to me about OBOD that night. And I sent off for the course. And I actually had the original pack. I've got this. They're must have been the first, because this was in the 90s, the first set of booklets. I often say to Marion, she must have taken that course and gone on with it. And I just thought, there is no 5 minutes in which I can do that. So I'm going to have to wait. And that was really sad, because I knew that I was going to do it, and that I would come back to it. Mm.
But everything has its own time. I've found that in my own life. I remember years ago, my first husband telling me to apply for something, to do something. I said, no, I can't. I knew it wasn't right. And a year later I did. And he said, well, I told you a year ago. And I said, yeah, this is the time. Yes. So there's not an optimal time to start things. But what you're doing is sowing seeds.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it. And I think the Wheel of the Year helps you with that, doesn't it? Because it gives you a time when you feel that you can plant your seeds. And I know with Normandy, we were doing this work. It was on an astrological basis, if you like, of the cycle of creating ideas. And you can certainly do that with the Kabbalah as well, when you're drawing down an idea and you're bringing it into fruition and testing it and all of these things. So, yeah, I think there is a right time. And I think, I was brought up in liminal space because of my Italian and Irish ancestry. I was brought up and again, because I wasn't brought up in a religion, it was my mother and my grandparents, they saw things, the night one of my uncles died, my mother was playing cards and she looked up, she went, I've just seen, his name was Akil, just come through the door. I can't have just come through the door. The phone rings and he'd just passed away. But it was kind of, this was just normal. You felt energies in places. You said, I don't want to go in there. No, I don't like this place. So I think when you brought up in that kind of liminal space, you're very in tune to when things are right, when it feels right, or when you're pushing against a closed door,
That's right. So do you have any regrets in your life?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And this is something that I guess when you work your way through the course that you try and integrate them, because I think that my enthusiasm, and I put a positive spin on it, the enthusiasm has sometimes made me rush at things without, and when I look back, I think if I'd just taken my time there a bit, maybe the outcome would have been different, So I'd let things happen, rather than push, And sometimes it was because I actually knew the outcome, and I thought, well, and that would be too personal to relate here, but it was just something that I thought, well, I know what's going to happen, so let me hurry it along, and I still had to wait.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Yeah. So those are the kind of regrets that I have. But I mean, they're not. I think it's much more about there's things I look back and I think, it might have been smarter not to do that, and you could spend a lot of time if I'd been brought up a Catholic, I would be very guilty. But my husband was brought up a Catholic, so I know what that means, the guilt thing. I haven't got that, I haven't got any Catholic guilt in me, which and I don't want to upset any practicing Catholics in the audience. But for me, I've seen that and I haven't got it.
Oh, I'm very familiar with guilt. I used to think that I was the proof of original sin. I don't believe in original sin, but I've lost a lot of that guilt. But it's interesting. I remember living in Lesotho, and I had friends, 2 Canadians. Each of them were half Jewish and half Catholic, but one had the Jewish mother and one had the Jewish father, and then the Catholic. And then we had a friend who was a Calvinist, married to a Swede who didn't have any religion, and he had no guilt at all. And the rest of us used to compete for who had the worst guilt. And none of us would concede. Someone says, you have no idea what it's like to have a Jewish mother. I said, no. Catholic guilt, you have no idea. And then the Catholic says, you have no idea about the guilt I had to go through. So, but none of us would concede. We all said we had the biggest guilt. So it's just really funny.
I'm just looking at the comments here. People saying, I'm full of Catholic. Is it actually full of Catholic guilt? I never was one.
I hope that's not considered appropriation.
Appropriation.
I'm happy to share that guilt with you.
Yeah.
But, and then Gabriella says, I know the future. I want to rush it. I try to, but despite all my efforts, I cannot. I need to wait for things to happen on their own. Gabriella, that was my story when I was younger. You may have noticed I speak quickly. And when I get excited, I go, brrr. But when I discover something like I want to be, whatever it is. When I discovered, a traditional healing, I want to rush into this. And I remember a wise person saying, slow down. And I was, no, I want to get there. But of course, I would always stop myself. It's like I was rushing to get nowhere because it's actually, it all has its own time.
Yeah.
And
I think, I've become a mentor now for OBOD. And that has been of such a deep, fulfilling experience because you get the opportunity to go back and go through the course again. And I know I could have done it on my own, but it's a glorious experience to do. But you do feel there's two ways. There's either this sense of rushing that your mentees tell you about, or it's a feeling I'm not doing it fast enough, and you're trying all the time to say, there is a time for everything, it's a season for everything. Yeah,
absolutely. Funny, Gabriella says this, I'm not too quick, the world is too slow. And then Eimear, guilt can be so paralyzing. Absolutely. I think if it helps you change your behavior in the now, do it. Otherwise, it doesn't help. Okay, this is, I don't know if you're Aaron or Aaron Carson, Punjabi mother. One day you'll have a daughter and she'll torture you as you've tortured me. I just hope I'm alive to see it. I had a friend who used to say, I hope you have a daughter like you. But it's, and with OBOD, it's always been a matter of timing and the right place at the right time, in my opinion. Absolutely, Andrew. And that's what's been so lovely when you, particularly with the Bardic grade, it's like, if it feels right for you now, this is something you might like to do. If it doesn't feel right, then you leave it for another time. And that's what's so gentle.
It is.
There are no deadlines and no pressure. Yeah. And sometimes I'll work if I need a deadline. I'm good if I have a deadline. And then if there's a deadline, then it demotivates me. I just kind of freeze. So it's like,
I think there's another process that happens as well when I was going through the course, is that when you really are in, it's almost like you're in the groove. Things start to happen which almost happen in the next verse. And when you're coming up, you open your packet, whatever, and you look at it, you think, hold on a minute, I've just been in that situation, this has been preparing me. So it's, what Andrew says, when it's really the right time, it's like you're in that flow, and chronological time seems to disappear. Not completely, but certainly to a certain extent. It's I found that very interesting.
Floriano Rubino says, siamo tutti saggi col senno di poi. So it means we're all wise the day after. Absolutely. Yes. It's such a great teacher, Floriana. I agree. Yes. So I'm really impressed, and I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, when I invited you months ago, you were all, hands, in either plaster or whatever, and you weren't well enough, and you've made an amazingly fast recovery. Yes. Can you just talk about that? Because I think it's a wonderful story.
Thank you, Eimear. Thank you. Well, I had an accident. I came off my bicycle on April the 27th, so that's 3 months. And it was a very, very nasty accident. And I broke both my arms and dislocated a wrist and tore the tendon off. And I was actually injured the whole of my body. I mean, with cuts and grazes and very severe bruising. And I was operated on twice in 24 hours. I had 2 general anesthetics, and I was on morphine, codeine and paracetamol. And this is somebody who never takes normal medicine, because I generally I'm very interested in alternative medicine. So as I was coming to and I was home, I had advice and also my own knowledge. I had also enormous support from my friends and everybody around me, and I don't discount that as well. And my husband was extraordinary, my family, but I was on courses of homeopathic and medicine and vitamins. And when I went for my last checkup, which was then only like 2.5 months, they had told me that I probably would never be able to do that again. So I sort of went like this, and they kind of went, "Oh, that's incredible." And it was this wrist. I have a titanium rod that has been inserted, and you can't, I don't know, you probably can't see the scar, and it's quite extraordinary. And they looked at it and they said, "Well, you're actually where we would expect you to be in a year. You're 2.5 months." And so I said to them, "Well, would you like to know why?" And I said, "Well, look, I've been taking aconite, homeopathic medicine for the shock. I've been taking comfrey, which many of you know is knit bone. You have to be very careful with it, because the Romans used to use it on the battlefield. But if you put it on too soon, it's so powerful that it will actually heal over something and leave an infection."
That's right.
You have to be really careful. Internal comfrey, which is, I was getting the name wrong,
Symphytum.
And then zinc, magnesium, calcium with vitamin D, otherwise it's not absorbed, and a large dose of vitamin C. And as I told this doctor this, I could see his eyes glaze over, and I could have sort of, I could be going like this, because he really wasn't interested. He said, "Well, that, it's really good, and you've obviously been doing your exercises, and off you go." So, it's, I mean, obviously there's a power of positive thought. Also, in our Druid Grove, we're incredibly fortunate to have healers, and one of our healers, Linda, came over and gave me some Bowen treatment. Now, I know Bowen. Gina, who'll probably be listening to this on record because she's in Indiana, she was talking to me on the phone about the fascia. It's the treatment of the fascia, because what this is all is injury to. And Bowen is this kind of treatment. It's done with a kind of pinching movement and touching on different points of the body. It's an extraordinary light treatment, but incredibly powerful. And I had 2 treatments of that. First time, Linda could hardly touch me. She said, "Look, you're injured so badly, I can barely touch you." But the second time, she was able to give me a full treatment. So, I am amazed. I mean, I am amazed at how quickly I've healed. And part of it, I think, was just this relief. I mean, coming off, I'm not a spring chicken, coming off, but I was going down a hill relatively fast. It was a country lane with sort of grass in the middle. Something happened. I don't remember exactly, because I must have blacked out. But it's a trauma, and I luckily had a helmet on, so please wear helmets if you're cycling. And I was fully clothed, and even though I had all these injuries, so it's an extraordinary thing that I'm here, and I feel incredibly grateful.
Well, that is just wonderful, and I'm grateful too. And we're coming to the end of our time.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you so much, Lorien, for carrying this, for being a fascinating, wonderful guest. I had no idea that you were still going on at the beginning when I first lost contact. So I thought I'll try and see if I can get onto the Facebook page and just say, "I'm sorry, I'll see you in September." And I thought, oh my God, you're still talking. And that has been just fascinating that you could just, because you said to me, you need to ask me questions, don't have me talking. I was redundant. So thank you so much for being an absolutely wonderful guest.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you've done to hold us all together. It's been amazing. And I know everybody will be saying the same. I hope you have a really fantastic holiday. Because
I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going away in my van next week and doing some wild camping, and then want to go to the Aran Islands for a while. And yeah, I just can't wait to be, free and wild, and hopefully some nice weather, but I don't care. I mean, you don't come to Ireland for the weather. So
we'll have a wonderful time.
Thank you. I'm just going to say goodbye. I'm going to shut you down, but don't go, because we're going to read the comments afterwards. So listen, thank you all so much for your patience. And sorry about, I don't know what it was. It kept telling me I had no internet, but my internet was working. I could see my Ethernet cable flashing and all of that. So maybe it was to show you how wonderful Lorien is and how she can manage, because I see a number of you had made comments that she should have her own podcast, and I'm in agreement with that. So listen, thank you so much for tuning in all these weeks. I see many familiar names and new ones. It's been lovely, and thank you so much for your comments. Linda and I will, or Lorien and I, her second name is Linda, I always get confused. Lorien and I will go over your comments and read them together. And I look forward to seeing you on the 9th of September with my next guest. In the meantime, have a good Lunasa, and remember, we will be having our OBOD Lunasa ceremony at 7 p.m. UK time on Saturday. So looking forward to seeing you then. So in the meantime, slán go fóill agus banachtaí Lunasa díobh go léir agus banachtaí imolc. Díobh atá lachrinne and deisceart. That's those happy imolc to those of you in the Southern Hemisphere. So until September, or even Saturday evening, if you're going to join us, slán go fóill.